Whenever you're tearing down components of an engine, if you're not careful pulling out the parts, it can bite you later on, as we found out with our risky business 85 Porsche 928. In this video, I'm going to take you through how to remove the old water pump properly so that the new water pump you're replacing it with installs without much fanfare. Stay tuned. Thank you for tuning into the latest episode of Grime Time with Rudy on the GuysWithRides.com YouTube channel. If you've been following along with the risky business Porsche 928 project that's sitting behind me, a couple of videos ago I showed us removing the water pump and putting a new one into place. Oftentimes what happens is if you rush the removal of a part, when you go to fully install it, you learn later that you did something wrong. The Porsche 928 water pump is a prime example. What we ended up doing is there's a total of 13 bolts that are required to get this pump bolted back in. Unfortunately, this one here, even though we could get the other 12 in, this one here we could not line up. And we wasted a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong. Ultimately, the way we took off this pump is what contributed to our inability to put the new pump on. So let me take you through what happened and what to avoid when you go to do this yourself. There's a still shot of the new water pump in place. We had already gone through the laborious exercise of putting in 12 of the 13 bolts. Unfortunately, the one I just showed you would not go in. And we basically called it quits the one night when we did that. So here we are. We're pulling it from the right place, and luckily it sets on there with two guide pins. Our first theory was that bolt that would not go in, we somehow stripped the threads pulling out the old bolts, which we saw a lot of comments when we were setting up for this, that a lot of people run into problems with bolts breaking and stripping. We said, okay, let's take the new water pump off. We hadn't tightened it down yet. And let's see if we can't chase the threads on that hole. So here you see me pulling off the new gasket, trying to preserve that as much as possible. At first, I did chase the threads a little bit with a tap, but then I actually just used the bolt. Oftentimes you can clean up the threads doing that. And so the puzzle here was, okay, we could, with the pump off, we could get the bolt in no problem. This begs the question, all right, is it the new pump without the right alignment? And we thought maybe the pump bore centers were different, but that was quickly ruled out. So here I am chasing the thread in on that, no problem, and then we realized what had happened. That red arrow is pointing to one of the two guide pins that the gasket and the water pump hold on to. You're about to see that we discovered it's bent. There's the close-up of it right there. That's one of the two mounting tabs for the water pump. That holds the gasket in place and the water pump, so you can bolt it on. It's actually bent towards the away from the pump. Now we had the theory, okay, that was pulling the pump just enough away for that the bolt that's closest to it not to line up properly. The other ones, there might have been enough stretch there to do it, but that one is the closest one to it and probably was causing the problem. So we rolled the tape back of when we pulled the old pump off, and this is where things went horribly wrong for us in hindsight. Now we still recommend using that bottom section here, but watch. It was the old gasket was still a little stuck, and here's where it goes bad. Not knowing, I'm basically ripping it off like a hinge, and that was not the thing to do. All right, so lesson learned. Now we've got a bent pin. What do we do? So we tried tapping it, putting the crowbar on it, and tapping it with a persuader one way, and then I used a punch pin to tap it ever so gently. We ended up actually putting the old water pump back on since we knew that fit. Got the hole that was giving us trouble, put the bolts back in, and used that as a guide to help it pull back into place. And that's what we're doing. I'm just cranking down on the bolt, not to over tighten it, because now I don't want to, have a strip bolt on top of everything. So just did that, pulled it out, confirmed again that it looked like we moved it in just enough. So sure enough, we wiped down the seal again with an alcohol swab. Luckily, we didn't tighten down the other bolts yet, so the gasket is still good. Put that back on. Carefully put the water pump in place. The new water pump in place, that is. And now, before doing all of the other bolts, the trouble bolt we put into place and try to get the pin to move a little bit more just to make sure we could get it in. Here I am tightening the bolt in, getting it into place without any others in, and that seemed to do the trick. I thought it'd be a good place to just show, and this is courtesy of Douglas Brown Bridge in going back to the early 90s, actually, when they did a nice, it's available online, there's the link, of a gentleman that redid his water pumps on his 928. And he did this nice diagram where it shows the 13 bolts. The red circles are the M10 by 25 millimeter that go around the perimeter. And the blue bolts, the 5 of those, are the 20 millimeter. So Porsche's infinite wisdom, they use 2 different lengths to put this water pump on. So it's important. And if you saw the last video, we used a combination of this diagram along with a piece of white corrugate where we punched the holes in. We actually traced our new water pump, put the holes in the approximate places, and put the old bolts in those places so we wouldn't have any confusion there. Also, we used brand new bolts from Fastenal to put this in. Didn't want to take any chances with old bolts stripping. That worked out well for us. All right, so what you're going to see me doing is putting the bolts in and tightening here. But an important note that we didn't show in detail is you have a unique situation where these bolts are potentially exposed to coolant but need to be locked down. So I see a lot of, when we were researching this, a lot of people use silver on silver anti-seize. That's not really the right thing to use. A lot of people recommended something called HT Moly, which is a very expensive German thread locker combination seal. And we ended up going with Permatex's Seal Lock. And that basically locks the threads down, but are removable, but also seals them against any common fluids you might find in an engine. And it's heat resistant, well above what this engine would be exposed to as long as the coolant system's working. By putting in that bolt first and the one opposite, we were able to pull the water pump in properly. So you're about to see another problem I had is in the upper right-hand corner of the pump, near where that hose outlet is, there is a spark plug wire bracket that actually attaches to that bolt of the water pump. And as I was tightening this down, that bracket was sandwiched between the pump and there it is right there. So luckily, I caught that before it was a problem, didn't damage the water pump gasket, and we were able to move on. So just another thing to watch out for is that little bracket, making sure it's on the outside of the pump before you start reefing down on all the other bolts. I'm feeling pretty confident that the bolt goes in and goes out. It was then a matter of using that thing, finding all the holes, and putting in all the bolts properly. I actually, at this point, removed the troublesome bolt and reinstalled it just to make sure I didn't have it cross-threaded and it would tighten down properly. All right, here I am torquing the bolts. Porsche specifies for any M6 bolt 6 Newton meters. So we made sure that my small torque wrench was set properly. 6 Newton meters is not a lot. Had them well tightened down. So I think we're in good shape on the water pump finally. So our advice is learn from our mistakes. And it's true for any project. Just be careful when you're pulling old parts off. because if you're not, you may have some unnecessary wasted time when you go to install the new part. So that's how you remove and install a water pump on a Porsche 928. I believe the water pump is pretty much the same from 1978 right up through 1995. So what we showed in this video applies, I believe, to all model years. But if you know differently, please comment in the section below. In my next episode, I'm going to take you through what we learned when we removed, rebuilt, and reinstalled the hydraulic timing belt tensioner system. But for now, thanks for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.